In the tunnel.
In the tunnel.
In the tunnel. You're listening to In the Tunnel.
Hello and welcome to In the Tunnel, episode number 111.
Long overdue. We are returning. I think this is the first time since our July 4th weekend.
Yeah,
So when you left Pittsburgh, it was an emotional burden on me that took a long time to recover from. But the podcast hosting fees did not stop. So
nope.
eventually we had to get back to this, sought out therapy once a week, because getting over Sean is a big deal for me. And eventually the therapist said the only way to get over your fears is to go through them. So we're back.
Yeah. Alright, anyway, on to the first big thing that's happened in the NHL season, I feel like, is the Oilers fired their head coach, Jay Woodcroft.
Yeah.
I really feel like this is the wrong guy getting fired. We also have a tweet here saying Holland was named GM in 2019, who's really who I think should have gotten fired. Um, I this is also the second coach he's firing.
Uh, you would know better than me.
Yeah,
I think.
because they fired Tippett earlier. I think so. Holland joined in 19, and then I think Tippett had like 2 years, and now Woodcroft has basically like 2 years, not even.
Okay.
Um,
So, yeah, what's your thoughts on this? I know you said that the initial takeaway is it's a wrong move, but I guess with the season having just started, 3-4 weeks ago, it's kind of like what move are you expecting because the roster was just built and the
yeah,
off season
but
has come and gone.
my problem is the moves that Holland has made to this roster. I don't think I can point at one that was not already a done deal that's good.
Okay, so let's play this out a little bit. You said at the very least we think that Tippett was the coach before Holland
Yeah.
or before Woodcroft, and so I think we're looking at a team that has changed over their roster outside of Draisaitl and McDavid. Not the most that you would say is possible, but a significant amount because they're shuffling the deck, trying to stay competitive, trying to
Yeah.
complete the puzzle. But it sounds like you got rid of Teppet, you got rid of Woodcroft, and it looks like on paper these guys followed similar philosophies in terms of roster building. They not so much an emphasis on defensive defensemen, not so
Right.
much an emphasis on great goaltending, although we've said on the show a number of times that elite goaltending is hard to buy. And they don't, all their top prospects are already at the NHL level.
But I've also
So
said that like I don't think you need elite goaltending because the trade off. Okay, first of all, the Oilers are in a weird position because they don't really have the money for elite goaltending. So they definitely needed better goaltending than they were ever got, right? Because they like I'm pretty sure at some point in like 2021 they brought like a bloated contract in for goaltending, which they really should have done. And you're looking at what 25% of your cap space going to two players, basically, right?
and at the time, even the McDavid deal was less than what people thought it was going to be.
Yeah,
And yet to still have this financial um, kind of rush hour piece in the sense that, you can move around a lot of different pieces, but these two cogs are still
right,
going to hold down a lot of the boat.
right. But like, okay, there is no doubt in my mind that McDavid and Draisaitl earn what they make. Okay,
Correct.
but
Statistically speaking.
it's not the coach's job to then use the rest of that money to build a competitive roster.
Right.
It
It's the
is
coach's job, in theory, to do the best with the roster that they're given.
correct.
However, that is a volatile statement in terms of depending on the coach's tenure, depending on the coach's level of
Right.
success, they do have a different amount of say in how that roster is. Like
Right.
Mike Sullivan hated the fact that Jim Rutherford brought in Ryan Reeves and
Mhm.
refused to play. That's because Sullivan didn't have a lot of say.
Right. But my point is that, like, okay, now if you're changing the coaches, okay, there's two reasons that you change the coach, really, right? They're not the ideal coach in the way that they manage the game to the roster that you have. Okay, that's one reason. Or they have the, or you think they're the right kind of style of coaching for your team, but they're just not doing it, right? Now, you've brought in two coaches in Tippett and Woodcroft in the past like 4 years, right? You, I, okay, first of all, I think they're different coaches, but I really don't think that the team has changed at a fundamental level for either of them. They were kind of just brought in as a, hey, we need a coach, here's the team. It's
This
not,
is yeah,
does
this
this
is
team fit your style of coaching?
this is shuffling the deck at the organizational level. This is very much like there's a lesson to be learned here, but we're hesitant to learn it because we think that maybe it's a different voice that's needed.
Right,
It's kind of like the kid in class who's like, they need a different teacher to get through to them, somebody who
correct.
speaks the same vernacular as they do in theory. The problem here is the talent isn't the issue.
No.
These guys, for a large chunk of the roster, at least they're top six, and
Well, okay,
I'm going to assume two of the three pairings are good enough to execute. The
so
problem is in the fashion in which they're executing.
So I will say their offensive talent is not an issue.
Correct, and it
I
never has
will
been.
have problems with their defensive talent aside from maybe two guys. And their goaltending is just a perpetual issue. It's been a perpetual issue for the past like 5 years.
Correct. Pretty much since McDavid entered the league, the focus has been on surrounding McDavid, and eventually, as Draisaitl entered as well, surrounding McDavid and Draisaitl. Not so much a focus on supplementing their skill sets with guys who can pick up where their weaknesses are, which
Correct.
would be strong goaltending and strong defense. I think what you're saying speaks a lot of truth, but it also kind of says, like, I don't know, that the Oilers have never had a problem with guys statistically
Right.
performing at a high level. Taylor
Right.
Hall was able to do it,
But even if you
while
look,
surrounded
right,
by
like
nobody.
Nugent
Like,
Hopkins is able to perform when he needs to. You had Kyler Yamamoto. He's able to do some
even
things.
Yakupov to some
But
extent statistically
my
was okay.
problem is we've just named, right? Okay, so you have McDavid and Draisaitl, then you have Hall, you have Nugent Hopkins, you have Yamamoto. What do all these players have in common?
They all put up
High
goals. They all
round
put up.
offensive draft
Yep.
picks.
Yes. When I look at teams like the Oilers, it almost is like, remember for the longest time with the Capitals, they were a team that got to the first or second round and always fell flat because you looked at goaltenders like Varlamov
Yeah.
when he was young, he wasn't very good. And they basically went through a turnstile of goaltenders as the
Right.
years went on. And they had great offense in Backstrom and Ovechkin. It's almost to another level
Mm-hmm.
of higher imbalance with the Oilers. Is like there's a model out there for what the success is, and they're just completely oblivious to it. Like, it's not like
Right.
playoff hockey models are like hard to find. Like, you look at Boston, you look at old school Detroit, you can look at a number of franchises at a fairly shallow level and be like, you build from the inside out like, yes, you absolutely have to have those pieces that are high profile scorers.
Right, definitely.
Like, you can't have a guy who would be like your second line right winger being your best scorer.
Right.
So like
But
you
like
have to have a franchise star.
the
But
point is that they have more than just franchise stars, right? They even have to give up their high round draft, the people they've drafted in the high round that are offensive talent, because they can't afford them. But what I'm saying is, okay, what if they transitioned one or two of those picks into a defensive talent? Yes, defensive talents, don't get me wrong, they develop slower. You're not going to get a Luke Hughes as often as you get a Connor McDavid or Draisaitl breaking out into the league in their first years, right?
yeah,
So
uh,
they definitely develop slower, but I am pretty sure like we'll go through, like if we went through their draft history, we'll see like twice to three times the number of offensive talents in the higher rounds than we will see defensive talent.
and I'm willing to bet if we look at the trade history, each NHL trade deadline, that we would see instances where they have traded away talent that would have addressed their problems at an NHL level for guys that they doubled down
Yep.
on stardom, when they bring in, offensive defensemen and they keep trading away draft capital. So now they don't have draft capital. Not that elite goaltending normally is available in the spots that they were drafting anyway, but they're not going to find it
Right,
now.
but like I'm not even saying go get elite goaltending.
I know,
Like,
but you're saying competent.
yeah, but like, okay, is really bringing Campbell on in that contract like competent goaltending?
Right. And look, there's something to be said for, because I know I've said it before on one of our episodes. Jack Campbell was statistically a good goaltender who got all-star nods, but the thing about the NHL is that all-star nods really don't mean that much in the NHL, because
Yeah,
in the NHL and the in MLB, every team has one.
one at
So
least.
like, yeah, Campbell probably earned it
Hmm.
because Matthews
Yeah,
or Marner probably were the automatic nods, but like you also have to look at from an angle that the way that the all-star selection is built, everything's by division. There's what, two, three goaltenders a division,
two.
which like there's six or seven teams. Like all you have to do is be, again, competent in that sense.
Yeah,
So like,
but like there's also that's a like competency. I'm not arguing. I'm arguing the amount of money that was paid out for competency.
yeah, and like
And again, that comes back to the coach can't do anything about that. They are now trying to play with what they're given. That is a GM move, right?
yeah,
Like I look
at
at
some
the
point,
moves that have been done by Holland, right? And I'm like, okay, if I'm trying to be hype, right? What do these moves do for the Oilers? And
well, I can tell you what they do for Holland. I can't tell you what they do for the Oilers, because if you say, "Hey, we gave Tippett 3 years, and we got this far, and now we've started a season and it sucks, and he's completely lost the locker room," that's one thing. To give a guy 2 years, not have the locker room, then give another guy another 2 years, never kind of really win over the guys fully anyway, because like they were convinced to a point of executing the way that they already were. Like there was
right,
nothing extra inspiring. So what Ken Holland does at this point is you keep bringing in different coaches, you keep bringing in new voices so that it's his job to lose and not Ken Holland.
right. But the problem with that becomes now this guy probably don't have the locker room. He's probably not going to get the locker room.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
so at the end of the day, when somebody's going to look at it and be like,
yes,
well,
this is the point where you have to look at it and be like, okay, as a player, we've gone through two or three coaches. It doesn't matter who they bring in, they can't get anything out of us that we don't already know. It's
my
just kind of
other
rotating heads.
problem is okay, yeah, okay, you get rid of Jay Woodcroft, right? Okay, fine. But like my problem with coaching changes in the middle of the season is like you're not bringing in another guy who does something different, right? You're generally just
You
promoting
have
some
to
guy
make the
already on the
best of
staff,
somebody. Yes, you make the best of what you can do.
right?
And the
So,
problem here, at least in terms of what I think, is inside the locker room. If I'm somebody on this roster who's been there, like McDavid or Draisaitl, and I do think that to a degree, those two care more about their
oh yeah.
stats than championships, which is odd for hockey. Like that's more, outside of hockey kind of sports to care
Hmm.
more about individual accolades, but hockey is more mostly team based. But if I'm McDavid or I'm Draisaitl and I do care about the team accomplishments more than anything, I look at the fact that, you know, we've shuffled players, we've shuffled coaches. Things are staying stagnant, things are staying the same.
Right.
And at what point is it just, you know, if they gave up on him, if they gave up on this defenseman, if they gave up on this coach, then why should I not give up?
Right.
What's the inspiration at some point to keep going?
Right.
And I think that's kind of where McDavid is at because we keep seeing articles about how, like, he's so tired of shouldering everything.
But I mean, okay, so there's another thing. It's like, okay, he signed that contract. The everybody kind of after he signed that contract expects the salary cap to just go up, right?
And it didn't follow that trajectory
It stalemated for like what few years.
because, yeah, COVID plateaued
Yeah.
everything.
So okay, there's two sides to that coin, right? So he's taking up a large chunk. So then he's like, all right, well, the salary cap will go up, and then they'll have some money to play with, and we can make a competent team. Didn't happen, right? So now he's kind of stuck.
Yeah, but again, the way that you and I have said that you build a contender and a cup winner is not based on
Right.
spending, it's through development.
But
So,
the point is, I really think it's a combination of the two, right?
yes,
It's
it's supplemental fine.
you need to have like obviously most teams are going to have some star who makes quite a bit of money, but you need the young guys from your farm to
Need the
you
juice.
need one or two of them to step up and be there when you need them in the lineup, right? It's
Absolutely.
it's a combination of both, right? Because like obviously, like if you look at Nathan McKinnon or Connor McDavid, you look
Yeah.
at these
Yeah,
players, even
Rantanen for
yeah,
McKinnon, which was years after McKinnon hit the top, the
yeah,
NHL level.
exactly. You see that there are still stars, but if you look at like Colorado's run, they had so many guys step up, right? You I you don't see that in the farm of Edmonton at all, I
And
feel
you
like.
you you do need grit guys too.
Yeah,
Like not even bottom line grit guys. You just need guys who, you have your stars. We're not talking about fighting guys,
yeah.
but you bring up some guy who,
But
you
if
know,
you
fulfills 70% of what an NHL player needs to
yeah,
do, but he brings a little toughness. He'll wear down the top line when he's
yeah,
matched up against them.
definitely. But I mean, so you can also look at like the Devils having the BMW line, right? Previously, like that was a grit line. It was okay. Technically, it was our fourth line, but they would go out there whenever, right?
Yep,
They just stepped up. They made a name for themselves.
yep,
That's
absolutely.
and the Devils still have. We have players that are going to be paid upwards of $8 million. Like it's
But it's about balance.
yeah, it's about
It's about
balance and
knowing what you need.
yeah. So I really think the fact like as much as I'm harping that somebody's taking like two players are taking 20% of the salary cap, it's like it's not the full excuse, right? Like you
Happens any good team, regardless of sport. Somebody,
right.
your top two players are taking up a chunk of, you know, Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelsey are
Yeah.
taking up a chunk of your cap.
Yeah. So I really think that if you're gonna like okay, this year's done, like you're not fixing it, right? But I really think like if you're the Oilers, like you owners, you're like something else has to change. Like you're you have the offensive pieces, but your goaltending and your defense have not been any better for the past like 5 years.
So let's wrap this up with a quick question, just rapid fire. If you're the Oilers, are you changing the approach or are you changing the personnel at this point?
So I would say give a new GM a clean slate, or as clean of a slate you can give them. And
Okay. And how long are you giving them?
I mean, I
A
would,
year and a half, 2 years?
yeah, I would say like 2 years. Like I
Until the
want
end of
like,
McDavid's deal?
yeah, I'd want like, especially if I'm McDavid, like I'd want to see, okay, what are we drafting? Like, did we make at least like a decent move in the offseason that would at least shore up our defense or our goaltending? Do we think, right?
Yep. And last question. If all else fails, say one of those things that we agree has to change, don't change. Are we moving McDavid? Are we moving Draisaitl? Are we just starting over?
I don't think so because Edmonton fans would literally riot in the street.
Well, they've moved top picks before.
Yeah, but like it
Granted,
was
not
like,
record-setting pace top picks, but
yeah. I mean, you.
keep in mind, McDavid is under contract one more year, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So if they change
But
everything outside of him, they have to figure that out quickly because
yeah,
they do not let him walk.
right. But my
You
point is
trade
that
him
like
or you
if you're
stay
an
with.
Oilers fan and the Oilers new GM or whatever let him like traded him away versus McDavid just saying nope, I'm out of here. They're two sides of a bad coin.
Correct, but you're in cap hell.
Yeah, I mean
So
you're in
you
cap hell
trade
already.
everybody else or you trade him.
Yeah, but also like, why are Oilers fans going to the game? Him, Draisaitl.
Yep. Well, this is the interesting part.
Yeah,
Like, I know I said rapid fire, but it's like, what moves can you actually make and change direction with how everything is currently built? You really can't.
no, I
They've
mean
kind
I do
of
think
put themselves in a
so.
box.
Next year the cap does go up a little bit because the whole repayment thing will be done.
Yes, likely not enough for them to splurge though.
No, but will they like? I really think if they if like I'm looking at the offseason, I see them pick up, even if they slightly overpay for like a middle pairing defenseman. Like that's already better than the last 5 years of acquisitions combined. Because like again, they don't need the amazing signing for a lot. They don't have the cap space for it. But they don't need it. They have McDavid and Draisaitl to offense, right? So get solid guys who they don't have to be top pairing or top six or whatever. I just want a guy who I can trust to go out there and play and give it their best for the time they're on the ice. Solid middle pairing D or like third liner or something.
See what they can do.
Yeah. All right. Let's
Personally, I don't think a lot's going to change. Anyway,
rapid fire through the standings a little bit.
as of Monday, I think.
Yeah, as of
Whatever
Monday.
it was.
So you had Vegas at the top. They're still at the top. You have Vancouver. Surprise to everybody. What the heck are they doing?
They've kind of, rescinded themselves back down to earth a little bit.
Yeah, but still, what the heck are they doing?
Well, yeah.
They
To figure
like
that one out.
they have had a really good start to their season, and then you have Los Angeles, which I'm not really. It's more like Vancouver has been the surprise for the start of the season. I feel like, and
Okay.
then you have obviously Edmonton and San Jose at the bottom of the barrel, but Edmonton is joined by their Alberta brethren in Calgary. So I guess all of Alberta is kind of sad right now.
Yeah, I mean that's just kind of how it's been for Canada-based teams for 20 plus years now.
Yeah, but that's a
You
little
know,
Like I really didn't think the day was this soon where Vancouver is head and shoulders above the other teams in Canada and the Pacific.
Especially head and shoulders above in scoring too. I mean,
Yeah.
we're talking about the team that has scored the most goals of any Western Conference team by
Yeah.
at least a 10-goal margin.
And they're pretty close to the least goals allowed too.
Yeah, and who's their goaltender? Did they
That I don't know. It's still Demko
Markstrom?
or something.
Yeah, Thatcher Demko,
Yeah.
Casey DeSmith.
hmm
Jeez,
So I mean,
it
they're like
is
all power to them, but like I thought it was another like 2 years until this happened, where they'd be
well,
this high. And then we obviously don't expect Edmonton to be this low, but we are here in this timeline.
Rick Tocchet just took everybody off the Penguins.
All right, on to the East or the Metro.
Casey DeSmith, Sam Lafferty, Ian Cole.
Yeah, so in the Metro, you have the Rangers at the top. Kind of sad, but what are we gonna do? And Columbus, surprise, surprise, down in the dumps, along with Pittsburgh. But
Yeah, that whole Gaudreau thing. But well, we also have to talk about how they have. Is it a Patrick Laine problem or is it a Blue Jackets problem? Because I've never seen a guy who in Winnipeg was 30 plus goals a year get shipped on the cheap out of nowhere to Columbus. And Columbus, well, first of all, his hair falls out completely, which is like its own thing that, like, I will blame Columbus for that. Like, you leave an actual hockey market for a college town, but they just healthy scratch Patrick Laine every game.
I'm pretty sure it's a Line A problem. I'm not gonna lie, he got shipped out for really cheap, so something must have been going on.
I don't know, like it's not like okay. First, uh, compliment sandwich here. That's what the therapist always says. If you're going to present somebody with bad news, compliment sandwich it. Give them some
God.
positive. They have Gaudreau, they have Werenski, they do have players that are like franchise cornerstones
Yeah,
to a
but I
degree,
mean, Gaudreau's on a pretty high
but
contract.
like they still are doing the same shit that they have always done, which
Yep.
is like take the Flyers rejects, take like a Minnesota Wild reject,
Yep.
like Ivan Provorov is like how many teams has he been on by now? Erica Branson, like all these guys are like journeymen that they just supplemented around guys that they said will give you 9 to 10 million a year.
Yeah, but like the aside from Columbus, really, the rest of the Metro is pretty
Up in the air.
up in the air. Yeah, like
I mean, we suck, but
yeah, but I mean, you're still what at 500 still. I'm pretty
nine.
sure.
Yeah, we're at 9-8 now.
Yeah, and what the Rangers have like the least games played in the Metro, and they have the best record. Who knew?
By one, yeah.
Yeah,
Rangers have, or no, the Blue Jackets have 19 games played, which is way worse,
yeah.
knowing that
No, but I'm saying the
they have
Rangers.
3 games in hand over the Rangers and still have
Yeah.
13 less points. That's
Yeah, and then like so as a Devils fan, right? It's kind of sad right now because like we're missing our best players. So I'm actually kind of surprised we're still there in the middle.
yeah. But as a Devils fan, like deep down, like right now isn't the part of the season that's going to matter for you.
No, but it's like
Like, do
the
you
season
want
started
Carter?
off pretty well, and then we've kind of
Yeah,
like lost all of our momentum with the injuries. But
I
I'm
mean,
still
that's
pretty
just the nature of hockey at this point in
yeah.
time.
But like again, I'm still pretty hopeful for the rest of the season,
Yeah,
and
I mean,
that's one thing. But like
long-term IR is like
yeah,
the weirdest thing in hockey too. Like a guy can go on that and be out for a week, or he could be on it for like 6 months, and
yeah,
nobody knows. And
yeah,
the NHL has like no policy for actually disclosing an injury. Like the NFL, you'll know if a guy's pinky bends the wrong way. But in the NHL, a guy could have appendicitis, he could have the flu,
yep,
he could have a broken leg. and all you'll hear is like upper body or lower body.
Yep.
And it's not like there's a lack of reporters either.
No, it's just they don't have to say.
Yeah. Um. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I think looking at the Islanders, no, we're not. We're both in agreement. We're not really surprised. They're
Nope.
6-5. Like, they gave massive extensions to guys who we looked at over the summer and were kind of like, why? And it's kind of looking like, well, why did you do that? I
Well,
mean,
we told
you
you.
kind of, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
like the ultimate New York thing to do is have great goaltending and then surround it, Rangers or Islanders traditionally surrounding it with things that make you scratch your head to a degree.
but I mean, the Rangers, they've surrounded it with what's supposed to be good talent. They've just been failing at developing the
Yeah,
good talent. So, I
yeah.
mean, that's a different issue.
The Rangers have had number one and number two overall picks in the past 10 years, and have lost all of them.
Yep.
So yeah,
All right. On to the NFL.
yeah. So we weren't going to talk about this because there were, you know, frustration has been its own thing with this topic for well over a year. You know, being
Yeah.
a Pitt fan, watching Matt Canada run that offense and it like working okay at Pitt like 10 years ago was one thing, but you
But
kind of could tell that when he was at Pitt, it didn't resemble anything close to an NFL offense.
mm,
And I always attributed it to that's why Pitt receivers and running backs weren't really getting drafted at that point in time.
mm,
Um, but for whatever reason, this dude became the LSU offensive coordinator, got fired in a year, became the Maryland offensive coordinator, got fired in a year, and then somehow got his way back through the Steelers. If you're as big of a sports junkie as I am, like I don't even watch college game day religiously, but if you scroll Twitter enough, every weekend it didn't matter which campus the college games were on, Fire Canada signs everywhere. They were at, Canadian Football League games, they were at baseball games, the World Series. So yeah, there's Steelers Nation is worldwide,
yeah.
and the message for well over a year was kind of clear how we felt about it. Um,
Okay.
but once the season started, we knew the stat that the Steelers never fire a guy in season. It was like the one thing you could bet on was like if they started the season every Tuesday, we would wake up and be like, Tomlin's press conference, please have fired him. And
Never.
it didn't happen. And the stat that I read this week was that the last time that the Steelers had a coach fired in season was 1941 when Burt Bell, who was a part owner and head coach at the time, fired himself. Um, so that's how far back it goes.
What the heck is that?
But eventually, I guess even for the organization, enough was enough. Now, granted, probably nothing is going to change this offense the rest of the year the same way we talked about how
Yep.
for the Oilers, like you have to make the best with the players that you have. So now we go from it's a fire Matt Canada problem to,
I
you
mean,
could split hairs on if, depending on the person, was it a Matt Canada problem? Was it a Kenny Pickett problem? Was it both? And I think a lot of people would say it's both, but it's more Canada
but
than Pickett.
my
And now you kind of have to be like, well, we'll find out if it's Pickett.
my only problem with like firing mid-season is okay, what in reality does that change unless like I mean, I understand why you do it, but like okay, what in reality does this change? Okay, you're not paying him for a couple days, but you're not getting a new like a couple weeks, but you're
It's
not
like a
getting a new
preventative,
offensive coordinator till the offseason anyway.
right? It's like a preventative cancer screening. It's like if they find
Okay.
something, we can deal with it, but like the root cause of why it's there is like, my decisions that cause it to get there are still my decisions that like I'm still following.
Right. Okay. Yeah, but
I mean,
again, like this was kind of expected, I feel like, in terms of somebody was gonna go.
yeah, at some point in time.
So
And look, I'm on record. saying to friends, saying to family that there are a lot of people when you search Twitter or whatever it is that people will say it's time to start Mitch Trubisky, it's time to start Mason Rudolph. I'm on record as saying
Doesn't
if it's
matter.
a Kenny problem, which it still very well could be, because like he misses open throws, he seemingly has confidence wavering. There is no quarterback on this roster that's going to get you the expectation that Steelers fans want. There's
Right.
nobody on this roster who fixes the problems. If you take Kenny's mobility and, what he did well in college out of the picture and insert Trubisky, who has mobility, but it's in the tape that he can really only throw to one side of the field accurately, and the other side he kind of tends to ignore. If
Mm,
you want Mason Rudolph, you basically are taking mobility out of the picture because
definitely.
he's cement in the pocket. So, for all that it's worth, none of these guys are going to do anything.
Right.
So
I mean,
I
they
think at
just
this point, the
present other
season is
problems, I
lost
feel like.
money anyway.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
kind of present other problems. So,
Yes, correct. So at this point, you have to kind of look at it and say, season, unfortunately, for the second year in a row, is kind of house money. Because at this point, last year it was like, it's house money because Canada should go and Pickett needs the development. At this point now, it's Canada's gone, but we can't implement a new system. And we now have to see, now that the cancerous growth is gone, that if Pickett can do anything else with a different voice.
okay.
And if it's not, then you have to start over again.
Yep. All right, on to the other football in
Yeah.
college.
Yeah, so it's playoff season in the sense that in a couple weeks we're going to be looking at the conference championships
Right. So,
having wrapped up, and we'll be waiting for the playoff committee. Um Sam is not in here, so we can do this without anybody yelling about Washington. So last week we go into the weekend with Florida State in the number 4 spot. They're out of the ACC.
yep.
I can tell you, being a Pitt fan, that the ACC this year has kind of sucked. I don't know that Florida State necessarily played as hard of a schedule as Washington did, but at the same time, they are undefeated.
Mhm.
The teams that they're supposed to crush, Florida State was crushing.
Mhm.
They're following the pages exactly as they should. The problem being, were they being rewarded? Now, unfortunately, over the weekend in a game against Northern Alabama, because I guess Florida teams, Southeastern teams, whatever it is, because Alabama played like Chattanooga this weekend in the middle of like in season,
Right.
or in conference schedule. So I guess some teams just put their last remaining cupcake game down at the end of the schedule. Jordan Travis, the Florida State quarterback, goes down with an ankle injury, very gruesome.
Oof.
And now Florida State still wins, but we kind of fast forward to this week, and we have a flip flop. We have Washington now in the number 4 seat. I if you ask me, trying to be unbiased, understanding that in my life as somebody who is a Washington alum, Washington played like 4 or 5 straight weeks of ranked opponents, whereas Florida State basically kind of got handed 3, 4 win teams most of the season
Yeah.
because the ACC is weaker. And I thought that Washington probably deserved the bump. But for the bump to come after an injury, you always have to ask, like, what really influenced it. We also have to look at things from the Michigan sign stealing scandal, where Harbaugh's suspended the rest of the regular season in the
Yep.
midst of Michigan being undefeated, and how likely, if Harbaugh is or is not on the sideline, how much that changes things, because they play Ohio State this weekend, and that's number 2 versus number 3, or number 1 versus number 3, however you want to look at it based on the poll. And does that mean elimination for one of them because they're both firmly within the top 4 now.
Yeah. So I mean, we'll definitely see about that. Yeah. So this was the week 12 that we've seen. Again, just the flip flop for Washington. Everything else stays the same.
So, what would you think as we kind of get into the Michigan stuff here? Because Harbaugh accepted the suspension because it probably wasn't going to work in his favor
Yeah.
to keep playing it out.
Mm-hmm.
But this truthfully does throw a card in that Michigan can play should they lose to Ohio State. So
Yeah,
how do we
but
look at how this matchup affects the playoff outcome?
I mean, I understand that they're like this card is always going to be played. I feel like regardless, right? And so I tend to just like one side is going to play the card in the way that benefits them after something goes wrong, right? So I'm of the opinion it's just like, okay, I want like if they're going to play this card, right? Let's say Ohio State plays this card after something goes wrong for their season, then it's like, okay, well, are you sure that it actually had some effect? Because like you can say anything you want. He's only like he's kind of like pigeonholed into accepting this 3-game suspension. I feel
Yeah.
like so. As much as it's probably like okay, an admission of guilt, is it really an admission of guilt over an admission of like I can't do anything about this? They're just gonna ruin me even more if I try to fight it.
I look at it and I think like if Ohio State loses, then they have the most to lose in the playoff picture because of that Harbaugh's not there
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that they still got it handed to them. But if they win, yeah, Michigan has the opportunity to play the card. I also look at this as like, you know, uh, in your moral compass, you don't want to look at Florida State and say they shouldn't make the playoffs because they have a backup quarterback.
right.
But at the same time,
But that's the
can you
Associated
look
Press for
at
you.
can you look at Ohio State having played Michigan, and can you look at Washington playing Oregon, who's like number 5? So you have the 4 team that's played the 5 team. You've had the 1 or 2 team play the 3 team, and can you look at Florida State and justify, okay, they deserve to be higher in the standings because they played number 20 Miami or something like that. I don't know that you can, and I think what's going to end up getting lost if it follows that script is that Florida State is going to feel like they were screwed out of the playoff because they're
Right.
going to think an injury caused it.
But
I'm
also
of the
like
opinion
I
that their
really feel like
schedule.
the top 25 is literally just as much as it's like a press rank thing, right?
Mhm.
And half the time I look at these I'm like, okay, it's a popularity contest. If you have like it's are you undefeated and how popular you are.
Right. The biggest thing in college football is having a 0 next to the loss
Yeah, but
column.
it doesn't really do much for some like
Right. It doesn't do anything for like
yeah.
James Madison was, fair league ranked.
Yeah.
Like they're nowhere near smelling it. Like granted they lost this weekend, but like, you know,
Yeah,
in theory, it still comes down to the program.
yeah, it's like, okay, well, do they have a 0 next to their name? And if they do, how popular are they?
Right. And that's actually one of the reasons why I think Alabama, who I think is ranked 8th right now with 1 loss, I think it's more likely for them to leapfrog Texas,
Hmm?
Oregon, and Florida State and grab number 4 should Washington lose and one of Ohio State or Michigan, then it is likely for
Hmm?
Florida State to get in just by winning out.
Right.
Because I
I would
think
agree.
that Alabama, their path is at some point they're going to have to play an SEC championship game, which means playing Georgia.
Yep.
So they have a game against number 1, and that's going to leapfrog
Yeah.
everybody, especially
But
with the Nick Saban factor. Like that's just the
my
guy who
thing
gets
is
it in.
like the problem is like D1 is so big that these teams, like regardless of how good they are, it's like you're always going to be talking about the Georgias, Alabamas,
It's about
Ohio
the money.
States, right? Like there's so many D1 teams that you're never going to talk about, even if they have like an amazing year. Like there have been so many times where these like, I guess, lower in popularity, lower in
Yeah, I mean,
presumptive.
like, look, case in point, people talk more about Notre Dame football, who isn't even in the top 10, than they will about a team that's undefeated like Florida State.
Right. So I mean,
It's about where the money comes from and
exactly, and like
how
that's why I
money
kind of
can
take
be
the
used.
top 25 rankings with like a pretty big grain of salt.
Yeah,
Because like
but I
sometimes I'm
do.
like, yeah, well, even if I don't agree with it, like, what do I care? Like, what
I
can I do
do
about it?
think, though, looking at the top four teams currently, I think there are years where you can say, okay, it's one team or two or three teams, and then the last one is a big drop. I
Yeah,
don't know this year, I've watched more Washington games than anything, but I don't know that there is a clear cut team that is going to outwardly dominate
mm,
compared to, if the if number one Georgia got paired up with number four Washington. I do think Washington's offense holds their own,
mm,
but I do think that, they play a defense in Georgia that has more strengths than any other Pac-12 team.
fair,
But I do think, like, you can cancel each other out in certain areas better than other years.
fair. Okay, on to the NBA. You want to take it away?
Yeah. So look, you know, last time that we spoke, I think I'm going to assume we talked at length about this NBA in-season tournament, the thoughts on it, whether it really had a significance to it. So we've come to kind of find out over time that this tournament, it starts November 3rd, so it's kind of almost a month in. Um, had the or has the semifinals um on December 7th
Mm-hmm.
and championship game in Vegas on December 9th. Whoever is in the championship game ends up playing 83 games in their season instead of 82. We have the 30 teams broken out into groups of five,
Yep.
which they really got creative with how they named these: West Group A, B,
C
C, East Group A,
A
B,
B
C.
C.
Um, so yeah, uh, what they did, they kind of took that and they said, okay, our I think it's Tuesdays and Fridays. Your games are considered
Yeah.
in season tournament days,
Mm-hmm.
which now starts to make sense. Admittedly, over the summer, looking at this from a glance, it didn't make a ton of sense to me, but now makes sense because it's like, okay, think of it like how the Summer Olympics have pool play
Yeah.
and then we go tournament. What I still have a gripe with is finding an in-season tournament to be productive in the sense that we know when it comes to basketball and most sports that you can
Yeah.
have fraudulent teams in the first half of a season.
Mm-hmm.
So this creates parity in the sense that your in-season tournament potentially has a winner that doesn't make the NBA play.
Right.
So I guess it's humorous in that sense. But at the same time, I don't know what this does to grow popularity with
I I'm
teams that
really
are.
like, I still look at these games and I'm like, I can't care any more or less about these games. Like it's just a normal game.
Yeah,
I still fail to see the appeal of having an in-season tournament or anything like that. It's been tough enough for me to watch basketball, to be honest.
yeah, and look, I'll compliment the NBA on they've done different things to try to differentiate the in-season tournament from the regular game. And so yeah, they implemented these very pastel centered courts to
Mm-hmm.
signify, okay, these are the days where we're doing pool play. Um, and so I guess in that sense, it makes it fascinating as a potential consumer because it's like, okay, if I want to go see a game and I'm into the creative side of today's sports,
Mm.
uniform stuff like that, then this more intrigues me. But I still don't understand outside of that component when we get to May, when we get to June, and we look back
What's the
on the
difference?
NBA season and we look forward to the finals, other than the courts and the uniforms, who's actually going to
Care.
realize that any of this happened?
Yeah, like again, they're not really any different to me. They're still counted as regular season games at the end of the day too. So it's like, man, why?
Yeah, and I think the only way in which the in-season tournament kind of branches over to an NBA championship
I mean,
is if one of the teams wins both, or if one of the teams makes the semifinals or finals, then it's a talking point for a couple of minutes. But
also like just hear me out here, right? Like with the pastels of like the courts and stuff, like just just look at Brooklyn and then look right next to Brooklyn
yeah,
and then tell me something different.
yeah, it's certainly an interesting thing. The
Like it I mean, I kind of get it, but like even if they were to do this, I kind of wish it was like a little bit more wacky, a little something cool, like cooler on the eyes. I feel like it's kind of monotone. Like I could barely tell like that light blue court had a different color on either of them. The
Yeah,
light blue courts all have light blue as the secondary color. Like that's not a good viewing experience, I feel like.
and truthfully, when I look at all 30 courts, and I one of the first things that happened when I looked at the picture for the first time is, and this is such an asshole thing to say, but like, you look at how every court has like a trophy in the middle of it, and
Yeah.
you look at like teams like the Trailblazers, and you're like, that's hilarious because their roster is nowhere near being able to compete for one. So it's almost like mocking teams that can't compete for anything.
Yeah. So I don't know. I'm still like I don't get this in season tournament. Like good luck. I
Yeah,
also like trying to follow the Nets has kind of been like whatever so far. So
yeah, it kind of has 5-year cycles.
yeah,
It's like we're trying to win, and then we rebuild, but they never rebuild in the sense where they get a top draft pick.
the rebuild takes 5 years, and you somehow end up in a place, and you're like, how did I get here?
You end up with a general manager that says, screw all the picks.
Yeah. So I mean, here Boston's at the top. What a
Yeah,
surprise, right? So
yeah.
I
I mean, like the surprises more start when we look at the Eastern Conference in the fact that like the Magic might actually be building the right way for once. They might actually be building a cohesive unit instead of just a decent player in the midst of
no,
wasted
but
draft
like
picks.
for me, if I look at the top four in the East, I'm like, all right, these teams are like not surprising to be up here at the moment, especially it's so early in the season, right? So,
Right, it is. And like when you look at the bottom and you see the Hornets, Pistons, and Wizards,
mhm.
like none of that is a surprise in
No,
any
not
sense.
at all. It's
But
not like having Vancouver second place, right? In hockey, so
right.
that's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I'd say that the East is, this is kind of true of the NBA more than any sport, in my opinion. The eyeball test rules supreme in the NBA. Like you
Right,
can
and like
watch.
here you have like Minnesota at the top, Oklahoma
Right, which
City.
I don't know that Minnesota passed the eyeball test because in the past few years their roster has been constructed with guys like Anthony Edwards and Carl Anthony Towns and been supplemented with decent pieces, but for whatever reason there wasn't a lot of cohesion.
Right.
Whereas it looked like this time around, as far as at least the start of the season, it looks like it's working, but we don't know.
Yeah.
Uh,
So again, it's like, okay, well, they're that. I mean, it's always weird to see Golden State like so low, but it's what, 2 years?
I mean, their stars are
Yeah.
massively aging.
Yeah, I know. I'm just saying, like, for recent history, it's kind of weird to see it, but it's like what you expect
Yes,
at the end of the
bandwagon
day.
fans are not ready for the downfall.
Yeah,
I am, but
we are.
I think it's hilarious.
Yeah.
And also like the Warriors tickets are still the most expensive in
Yep.
the NBA. Like you search the ESPN like NBA schedule on a certain day, if the Warriors are home, you see like Celtics tickets as low as like $20, Milwaukee tickets as low as $10, and Warriors tickets as low as 63.
Yeah.
Like it's still very much the most expensive ticket in the NBA.
Yeah. Well, I mean, aside from that, it's like again, the NBA hasn't really shaped up to be anything that we're not expecting yet.
Right. I mean,
So,
Oklahoma City, I think we kind of like if you pay attention to how many first round picks they've acquired in the past 5 years, shipping off talent,
yeah.
like it was only a matter of time before they started building upwards just because it's like they had so much draft equity
Hmm.
that anything that failed, they were going to like not lose that much sleep over.
Right.
And they're actually in a position to keep going with that. Like they still have years of first round picks left.
Yeah. So, you got anything to wrap us up with?
I don't know. Like obviously it's been a while since we've done this. Not too much has changed. But uh, yes, I mean sports are. It comes a time where like it does for us get a little bit harder to find ways of introducing some of these topics without
Right.
saying the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
It's not that we intentionally leave months without putting together an episode, but um I don't know. I think sports as a landscape has kind of become more easily expected.
Yeah,
Like
I mean,
we look
like,
at a James Harden trade and we see that he sat out and then got traded to the team that he wanted all along. When it's kind of like we've seen how the NBA has been
operate.
trending towards a players run league, and we expect that. There's not really a hot take to that.
And like again, as for at least for the sports that we've looked at, right? What are we expecting aside from like Vancouver being like the odd one out in the NHL? Like,
Mhm.
there's not really anything too hot happening. So I mean, we'll try to keep finding them and talking about them.
Yeah,
But
and
yeah,
we do have a couple of things planned. We might just have a little fun with going through like minor league hockey teams and
yeah,
just trying to have some fun with trying to pick apart the logos,
yeah.
stuff like that. We might also bring in a third person to talk about something that they actually brought and proposed the topic to me of wanting to talk about how today's generation of college and up and coming professional athletes, their mindset and their work ethic. But we're kind of, holding off on that one to see if that third party is interested in it because I think that's a good conversation piece.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So we do have stuff in the chamber. It's more just finding the right time and finding the right resource to, bring
Yeah,
it to life.
definitely. Yeah. So thanks for tuning in, and catch you next time.